Okay, so let's see.
You have a marriage
A,
quote to start
a
us off,
movie quote,
or a movie
a
quote.
relationship movie quote.
And you
Um,
know, I know none of these. Like, I don't remember any quotes. That's you and the girls, our daughters, I mean.
what do you want?
Seems very directed at me. Give me a hint.
What do you want?
It's not Tom Hanks. That doesn't sound like something he would say.
No, this,
Is it a comedy?
no,
I didn't think so.
this
Drama.
is,
Notebook. It's the Notebook
this is the
because I was
notebook.
just. It's at
This
the
is the
very. Is
notebook.
that like right before the big line?
I don't remember. That's kind of the big line. What's the big line in the notebook?
Oh, I
Isn't
looked
that
it
the big
up.
line?
Well, I mean, it's like I want all I want is you, or
Yeah, I don't know. And then
again,
they
it's
and then they hold hands and die in the same bed.
that's the way we want to go, right? Have you
we
ever thought of that?
we didn't watch that on our anniversary because I made you go to Anchorman, but then we watched it at home
And we
after that.
bawled
Oh gosh, we
because you
cried.
felt bad that we went to Anchorman.
Yeah, I did for sure. Although
Well,
Anchorman was wonderful.
let's focus on the purpose of marriage.
Purpose of marriage. We talked a little bit about that last week and just kind of listed some things that were like, yeah, I think this is what we've thought, what the world thinks.
Yeah, and so a couple ideas like after that conversation that we came up with, should we share?
No.
Should we share it? What are your ideas? Should we share our ideas? So we came up with just a list thinking, well, companionship was a big one we talked about.
Yeah.
Companionship and security.
Mm-hmm.
And you said,
Sex, obviously. Yeah.
to which I said, have a family.
Yeah. Procreate. That's, the technical term for it, I think.
Um, I thought like to be known. I thought, oh, the purpose of marriage is
Yeah.
to be known by somebody.
It's just something we do. It feels like for some people, I think they believe it's just a societal thing. Like, oh, it's just the next thing you're supposed to do. That's what a good person does is get married.
And then the one we kind of left with was how marriage is meant to or supposed to make us more like Jesus. And so that's what we thought we would focus on a little more today. So if the point of marriage is to make us more like Jesus, we thought we would just do a little check-in and just be more of a how are we doing with that?
How are we doing that?
How are we doing? How are we doing in the topic of is our marriage how has it is it making us more like Jesus, and if so, how?
26 years, how has marriage made us more like Jesus? I think even with, it's good to know, like, for any of our relationships, God's going to use those relationships, all of them, to make you more like Jesus. The marriage relationship is the most poignant, probably the most rich, the one that can mimic God's relationship with us the most. But I don't think we often think about that. So I think in some ways it's made me more like Jesus. I've certainly
So you kind of have to ask yourself, who is Jesus too? Like, so what are his attributes?
Jesus sacrificed, and so I think it has certainly made me more sacrificial. I've had to compromise. I wouldn't say Jesus compromised, but I say compromise because, like, it's not always about what I want. It's not about just me anymore. Those are a couple things.
I think that's a huge one, is that when you get married, it's not just what you can gain from it, but more of like you start thinking about what's best for the other person, and how that even my actions, what I say and do, like will have an impact. It might have a direct impact on you, but it will have an impact even in public if I'm not even with you.
Yeah.
Because when you are married, like you become one. And so like when they talk about Brian, they talk about me. So you just see it, your marriage as one. So what I do or how I act or what I say, like it gets connected with you too.
Yeah, what we say about each other impacts the other more than any other relationship, or it should. Like, that's a good thing, and it can be a powerful thing that's used negatively. But that's one thing. Like, if your opinion or what you say about me isn't the largest or most important voice in my life, that might be a bit of a flag if it's
Mhm.
still a parent or if it's still
Mm-hmm.
um, a mentor or an old flame or something like that. Might be a whole thing, but
Mm-hmm.
for sure, what you say affects, yeah, the other person a
And so
ton.
then that's what makes you start thinking too, then. It's like, okay, who is Jesus? And I think I was thinking about this the other day of just the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. Thing I not struggle with, but maybe it's hard for me is probably, well, patience, maybe.
I think our marriage has made you more patient. Being married to me made you more patient.
I know well, I think any marriage, not
Certainly,
just our marriage. So,
certainly more
yes,
patient than when we
it
got
has made
married.
me more
Married,
patient
sure.
because things are done on a different timeline, on your timeline and not my timeline. And so, God has definitely given me opportunities to grow in my patience.
Oh, opportunities to
That's a
grow.
good
How
way to say it.
self-aware of you to say.
I feel like He's given me opportunities to grow
Yeah, what an
in
opportunity.
self control. I remember my mom said to me early on in our marriage, like, you don't have to tell him everything. Like, not in the sense of like secrets, but
That
like,
sounds dicey. Yeah.
it's like every thought I have of, and to me, I think of it as nagging or, oh, I wish you would do this, or I would do it this way.
Yeah.
And I just remember her giving me that wise counsel of like, you don't have to comment on everything. Like, so self control, I think with the tongue is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways. And I'd say there's ways that, I mean, we're 26 years in, for sure, still growing and still not finished products and not
Mm-hmm.
um, like Jesus.
So, so with that, we want to leave just with a Bible verse to just be
Two
like
verses.
thinking about. And so I'm going to read for you Galatians 2:20, and I'm going to read it with the dogs in the background,
They're
and
barking.
because they're barking, and but it's beautiful outside, so we're not going inside. Galatians 2:20 says, "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." And if you think about that, um, that is pretty deep when you start thinking about
Mm-hmm.
Christ living in you. And if and the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So if I have the Spirit of Christ living in me, like how does that then affect what I say, what I do, my thoughts, my actions, what I choose to watch, how I then in my marriage,
Yeah.
how I treat you. So
Yeah, and this is a verse that I think, um, like we've used this in ministry too, where it's not me. I've been crucified with Christ. It's not me who lives. Christ lives.
mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go after the things that are important to Christ. So what is God's heart? Like what's important to God?
Mm-hmm.
People that are far from God, relationships, not yourself. And so that's certainly for me. That's a good one for that sacrificial. Like yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about you.
Yeah. And the second verse is John 15:12. And I like this one because it's pretty clear. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So in order to do that, we need to grow closer with Jesus. And so I guess I encourage you to spend time in God's word, because the more you spend time in God's word, the more you get to know the attributes of Jesus and how he loves you. And then that just will impact how you treat others and ultimately love your spouse.
Yeah. And that's one of those verses too that think about the disciples that was they probably thought one thing when Jesus said it, but then after he
Mm-hmm.
died and rose again, that meant something different to them. So as they look back and they're like, love each other as I've loved you. Well, what did Jesus do? He
Mm-hmm.
died for them. He sacrificed for them. Like it wasn't about him. It was about them. So.
Yeah. All right. So the challenge for this next week is to think about the question of, okay, if the point of marriage is for you to become more like Christ, how are you doing with that?
How you doing with that?
How are you doing with that?
See you next time.
Bye.